Welcome back. The Bronx Defenders is a public defender nonprofit that is radically transforming how low-income people in the Bronx are represented in the justice system. The Director of Community Engagement for the Bronx Defenders, Aleciah Anthony, and the Director of Adolescent Defense Project for the Bronx Defenders, Orayne Williams, join me now in studio. Aleciah, Orayne, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, now, of course, we are going to get into a few topics, but I want to, obviously, and our viewers to know a little bit more of an overview of the organization. So tell me a little bit about the Bronx Leadership and Organizing Center. Aleciah.
Yeah, so the Bronx Leadership and Organizing Center was co-founded by the Bronx Defenders. And so it is a coalition of nonprofit organizations working together on issues of economic mobility. And so that means we work on various issues in the Bronx, including affordable housing, youth development, workforce development. And so really the purpose of the groups coming together is to really make sure we are a united force in the Bronx working on those issues so that we're not siloed.
Yeah, when you talk about this focus as well of just being in the community, seeing what the issues are, any major concerns that come up? Maybe Orayne, if you want to take this one.
Sure. One of the major concerns that we're seeing is the school to prison pipeline. As I work with adolescents at the Bronx Defender, and just to briefly share what the school to prison pipeline is any system and practices within the school that funnel our students into the legal system. So we're looking at things like suspension, we're looking at the zero tolerance policy, we're looking at having NYPD on school sites, being involved in situations that should be resolved by social workers and school staff. So that's one of the major issues that we're seeing right now in the community is the school to prison pipeline, funneling our students into the legal system.
Yeah, when you talk about the school to prison pipeline as well, what role does the mental health kind of toll or even the support at that kind of contribute to this kind of system as well?
Right.
Maybe Orayne?
Yeah, I could jump on that. So I think the lack of mental health support in school and the over-reliance on discipline is playing a role in what we're seeing in the school to prison pipeline. And I even like to go deeper with that and say it has a lot to do with perception and perspective. How you perceive someone, how you perceive someone will influence and dictate how you interact with them. And, you know, we're seeing that if you're perceiving young people as threats, then you will try to discipline them more as to rehabilitating them. And, you know, statistics and research shows that administrators and school staff tend to view, even specifically Black and brown students, their misbehavior in school more threatening and more dangerous. And then you see that the approach that they take to resolve that is one of discipline, which more so funnel into the school to prison pipeline as opposed to one of rehabilitative mental health support.
Yeah.
I also think that mental health is important in the schools because as the kids are being suspended or going through all these disciplinary process, their self-esteem begins to become decreased. And as they go through the process, they begin to think of themselves as less than, and they begin to internalize those feelings of inferiority. And so mental health support to make sure that they don't stay in that they're able to come out of that and be successful is very important. And so I think it's great that we're increasing awareness around mental health. I know in New York City, 7 of our schools in the Bronx just got new mental health centers. And so it's important that those mental health centers are in the school so that it's integrated into their lives and it doesn't seem that it's opposite.
Yeah, when you talk about these efforts as well, right, these are kind of advances to be able to kind of, like, again, not help the students feel trapped, right? And with that as well, what would a truly supportive and inclusive space look like? Is this kind of the way to go, you'd say, or the steps to get there, to obviously provide this type of care for people so that they don't feel this trapped?
I think an inclusive space is a space where kids can bring their whole selves to the classroom, and that the school is supportive in that way, that there are social workers and guidance counselors and even curriculums that support their developments. We know, and we heard earlier, that young people learn in different ways, and so we have to have that. We have to have restorative justice and peer mentoring, and all those things help to make young people successful.
Yeah, with that as well, Orayne, I mean, what changes would need to happen at school, city, or even policy levels to kind of make everyone feel, and students feel that they are treated fairly?
Yeah, I think I'll go to the root of it. perspective again, I think the real change that we need to see is that we need to begin to view young people and students holistically. You know, when they show up in a classroom, that's just one role that they're playing. They're playing the role as a student, but outside of that classroom, some students are playing the role of as a caretaker for a sick parent, or a caretaker for a grandmother, or a caretaker for their sibling. And as Aleciah said, we need to have young people come into the school and bring their whole self, so that we will be able to address not just the learning part of it, but the things that are serving, the factors that are serving as learning barrier, serving as barriers to their learning, which is why mental health is super important. And then definitely on the policy level, you know, that there are a lot of coalition right now that are pushing back on suspension. There's a lot of coalition right now that are pushing for more social workers in school, for more community-based organization to partner with schools. So there's a lot of change needs to happen within the school itself as it pertains to the interfacing with young people. But then on a policy level, on a systematic level, there definitely needs to be some change in policies and in the implementation of the policies that we're seeing in schools.
Yeah, when you talk about even that suspension in general, something that I found in some of the reports we were seeing was that Black students make up 25% of New York City's public school population, but over 50% of suspensions. Why is there such a big gap here that we're seeing?
Yeah.
Aleciah?
Yes, so I think that is not a coincidence. It is not shocking and surprising because it mimics mass incarceration.
Yeah.
So when you think about mass incarceration on a level, you see those same numbers of statistics, right? People of color being smaller numbers of the people in communities, but the larger numbers of people that are incarcerated.
Yeah.
So it definitely mimics that. Also, our young people are hyper-surveilled, right? They have high numbers of just people looking at them and watching what they do, and even using that when they're just being kids.
Right.
Yeah.
Why can't our kids be kids?
Yeah.
And you even talked about, I mean, Orayne, you mentioned it as well, how sometimes there are students when they go into the school, but they are caretakers. They have other roles and other kind of things that on their shoulders that they have to worry about. Another statistics that we were seeing was that students with disabilities are more than twice as likely to be suspended. What's going wrong here, Orayne?
Definitely going back to the lack of those mental health support in schools, right? So we have young people who have learning disabilities and behavioral challenges, and they're being interpreted as dangerous and threatening as opposed to someone who needs support. I've sat in IEP meeting advocating for clients and really fighting with schools who were silently pushing students with learning disability out, and having to sit in those rooms and fight and say, no, this young person IEP states that they need this service, so it is your responsibility to provide them with that. So we're seeing where there's a misunderstanding and mishandling of young people who have learning disabilities, and a lack of resources for them. And I do believe that the resources are there. Is for the schools to be more intentional about accessing them and advocating for them to then provide them to our young people, specifically those with learning disabilities.
Yeah, now we even talked about some of the advancements that Bronx Defenders is helping, obviously to do, even the importance of mental health at that. For you, Aleciah, how can schools replace punishment with support systems like a counseling, a restorative justice, or trauma-informed teaching as well? Is that something that is afforded and can be done, you'd say?
Absolutely, it can be done. And I think the way to get that to happen is that parents and students and community groups need to come together to make sure that they are pushing the schools to think about alternative solutions. Because when you suspend kids and take them out of school, right, other things are happening in the community. They then feel like they are excluded versus included. And so then again, we don't want them to fall prey to the school to prison pipeline. And so we want to see them in school, creating alternatives in the school to help them address whatever needs that they may have.
Yeah, you talked about even that part right there of parents as well, right? How is the Bronx Defenders working with parents who may be navigating this challenging moment in time?
So in the Bronx Leadership and Organizing Center, we bring together parents, teachers, students, and community-based organizations to really look at what's happening in the schools and think about solutions to address them. I think when you want change in the community, people in the community have to get involved. They have to be invested. And parents, you know, to the parents listening, I know it's tough. I'm a single mom, right? So I know how difficult it is. You may be working. Maybe you don't even understand what's actually happening in the school, but get to the schools. Make sure teachers know your name, know your kids, and stay on top of them.
Yeah.
Orayne, anything you'd like to add as well to that? I think an important and such a crucial message as well to share. How about for you,
I'll
Orayne, as
definitely
well?
add and say we have to bring, you know, parents and students are stakeholders. And when we're talking about making changes and implementation to benefit them, they need a seat at the table. So one of the things that we do at the Bronx Defender, we give voice to parents, is we give voice to our young people and bringing them at the table in the space where their thoughts and their expression needs to be heard. We're meeting with council members and we're elevating the requests and the cry for help of our clients, whether it's parents or young people. So definitely them having a seat at the table, being a part of the conversation. You can't bring change without including the people who you're bringing the change for. And we see a lot of that is happening where we're bringing in changes without talking to the people who need the change.
Yeah. Something that I found interesting as well in learning about the Bronx Defenders is that you defend nearly 20,000 low-income Bronx residents in criminal, civil, child welfare, and immigration cases, right? We talk about these Bronx residents, but here you are as well talking about the importance of these younger generations.
Yeah.
Why is it important to advocate for them and to also add them as part of your mission of who you defend?
Absolutely. I don't think there is a chance for real, lasting, sustainable change unless young people are involved.
Yeah.
They have to be heard, their ideas, they're new, they're brilliant. And so we work with young people. We have an action council full of young people who are really invested in these issues. And most people think young people don't care, but they do. They watch, they see, and we need to create opportunities for them to be involved every day.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else you'd say as well about that? Or?
Definitely. I think when you're thinking about young people as well, when you talk about young people, there are two sayings that come to mind. One, it takes a village, right? And then the second one is that the youth are our future. So if we strongly believe that youth are our future, if we're incarcerating them, then we're incarcerating our future, right? If we're mishandling them, then we're mishandling our future. And then we need to become that village. We need to show up as a village. We need to show up with that support. And it may incorporate different roles. Aleciah may show up one way, I may show up another way, but when the village come together, we can better support our young people. And Bronx Defender is that village.
Awesome. Well, with that, I mean, I think that's the perfect kind of tie-in to also let people know that they can be a part of this village, helping the younger generations. With that, Aleciah, Orayne, thank you so much for joining me today and being with us.
Thank you
so much
for having us.
Definitely. Now, to keep up with all the efforts made by the Bronx Defenders, please go to the website at bronxdefenders.org. We've come to the end of our show today. I'd like to thank all of our guests for joining us and, of course, you, the viewers, for tuning in. If you've missed any part of today's show, you can catch the recablecast at 5 and 8 p.m. tonight on Optimum Channel 67 and Verizon Fios 33, or watch anytime on the web at bronxnet.org. You can catch a brand new episode of Open with Darren Jaime on Wednesday and with Rina Valentin on Friday. I'm Jonathan Calixto. Stay informed, stay inspired, and stay safe. Until next time.